Listen, today we are unpacking an incredibly raw, profound true story. We're going to dive straight into the personal notebooks of an author who survived a childhood so chaotic and an addiction so severe that frankly it is a miracle he is even alive to write about it. But I want to be clear right off the bat, this explainer isn't just a gritty story about the darkness of the streets or doing time in a prison cell. It's really a masterclass in how human beings survive the unsurvivable. It holds these massive, hard-won lessons about pain, how we cope, and how we build resilience. And honestly, those lessons apply to every single one of us.
So how crazy was I really? That's the exact question he asks himself looking back. And it's a completely fair question, because he wasn't just, getting high on the weekends. He and his friends were treating random medicine cabinets like this twisted open buffet. They were swallowing entire bottles of random antidepressants and whatever else they could get their hands on, literally just to see what would happen. He'd wake up the next morning still completely loaded from the night before. So yeah, by any conventional metric, he was acting completely out of his mind.
I mean, just picture this for a second. You've got a 17-year-old kid absolutely hallucinating out of his mind on massive doses of stolen pills, plotting what he genuinely believes is just an absolute criminal masterpiece. The grand plan? They were going to steal a Cadillac, grab an antique guitar, and take every single rifle from his father's gun rack, and then just casually drive across the Canadian border to pawn the whole shebang for drug money. I know, it sounds exactly like the plot of some terrible, low-budget heist movie, but this was his actual day-to-day reality.
But there is a really profound distinction we have to make here. He wasn't doing drugs to have a good time. He wasn't chasing pleasure. He was chasing complete oblivion. And look, on some level, we can probably all relate to wanting to just numb out when things get overwhelming, right? We all have our vices. But for him, this wasn't taking the edge off. This was a desperate, life-or-death need to completely anesthetize this massive, gaping wound that the rest of the world couldn't even see.
So you have to ask, how does a kid even get to that point? Well, let's look at the systemic betrayals he was dealing with. When he was just 14 years old, his stepfather, a guy he very accurately dubbed a corruption officer, caught him smoking a joint and wanting to call girls on the phone. Just normal, dumb teenager stuff. The punishment for this? His stepdad literally had this 14-year-old kid locked up in a maximum security prison cell with a mafia hitman who had 3 proven bodies on his record. I mean, you almost have to laugh at the absolute terrifying absurdity of it.
Well, I'm convinced. The sarcasm just drips right off the page there, and frankly, it absolutely should. But this monstrous abuse of power actually served a very specific and highly relatable psychological purpose for his family. By treating him like this incorrigible monster, they successfully branded him as the designated bad kid. It's a classic family dynamic. Think about it, if all the family's chaos could be completely pinned on this one supposedly defiant teenager, then nobody else had to look in the mirror and deal with their own massive dysfunctions.
The psychological gravity of this whole thing is just staggering. At age 14, he's totally betrayed and locked up. At 17, he's stealing rifles to fund a massive drug habit. But we have to jump back to the very beginning, age 5. That is where this heavy, protective armor was really forged. Those rifles he was stealing at 17, those were the exact same rifles his terrifying biological father used to hold his mother and his siblings hostage in their living room when the author was just a little 5-year-old boy.
Okay, so let's dive into the psychology of this, drawing on a crucial framework from Dr. Gabor Mate, attachment versus authenticity. When you're 5 years old, your parents are basically gods. You rely on them entirely just to survive. If that caregiver is violently dangerous, a child's brain faces a literally lethal dilemma. Recognizing that your parent is actually a monster means you are totally unprotected in a terrifying universe, and that's just way too much for a child to bear. So, to survive, the subconscious makes this incredibly tragic trade-off. It decides, my parent isn't bad, I am bad.
It is utterly heartbreaking. Just imagine a 5-year-old kid trying to process his enraged father holding the whole family hostage with a rifle. His tiny little brain didn't have a conceptual file folder for, my dad is a dangerous monster. So he assumed it was just a game, cops and robbers, good guy, bad guy. His brain literally rewrote reality to make the impossible survivable, just to get through that single night.
And the thing is, this kind of trauma isn't just a collection of bad memories in your head. It is a severe physiological injury. Even years later, well into his adult recovery, his nervous system was completely stuck on emergency backup power.
We're talking relentless insomnia, sudden, violent panic attacks. He'd get this crushing chest tightness that felt exactly like a heart attack, and he would sweat profusely just trying to sit in a normal room with other human beings. The trauma lived deep in his physical body, making just basic, everyday life feel practically unlivable.
So how did the system respond to a teenager who was dripping in sweat and having daily panic attacks? Well, they completely betrayed him again. They threw him in therapy, prescribed him endless pills, and slapped him with the label of a chemically imbalanced kid. It was such a convenient narrative for everyone else. As he so powerfully notes in his journals, it was just easier for everyone to medicate the smoke than to admit his childhood home had been fully engulfed in fire.
And this right here reveals why true recovery is so agonizingly difficult. His self-destructive behavior, the heavy drug use, the crazy crimes, the people-pleasing, that whole bad kid armor, it wasn't a disease operating in a vacuum. It was a clumsy medicine. Placating dangerous people literally kept him alive when he was a kid. Our subconscious fights tooth and nail to keep these habits, these clumsy ways of protecting ourselves, because it genuinely believes that our life-saving responses in a dog-eat-dog world.
This builds into an absolute paradigm shift. When people looked at him as a teenager, they fixated entirely on the smoke. They asked, why the addiction? Why the stealing? Why is this kid so out of control? But focusing purely on the symptoms completely ignores the root cause. You have to stop asking, why the addiction, and start asking, why the pain? The pain is the fire. The drugs were really just a desperate, flailing attempt to put it out.
But here is where the profound, hard-won wisdom really starts to emerge from all this immense suffering. Even after recognizing all the horrific things that were done to him, he realizes that sitting around blaming his parents or even blaming himself is just a total dead end. Blame is like running on a circular track. You're just running in place, staring at the wreckage without ever actually cleaning it up. To truly recover, you have to realize that blame is a completely useless weight. You just have to leave it behind entirely. So, what does the actual route to healing look like? Well, first, once you drop that useless weight of blame, you have to bring this raw, brutal honesty to just see the wreckage of your life for exactly what it is. Then, you replace the blame with relentless curiosity. You start asking why you behave the way you do, and you try to understand that wounded child beneath all those crazy behaviors. And finally, the hardest part, you start acting in alignment with your genuine self. Not the people pleaser, not the armored bad kid, but the real, authentic you.
I know this is incredibly heavy stuff, but amidst all this grueling psychological work, you get these beautiful, warm flashes of humor and realization from him. His battered nervous system forced him to live his entire life with a lead foot, always redlining, always escaping, driving 100 miles an hour down a road to nowhere. But he finally realizes, wait, he controls the accelerator now. He jokes that he could even trade his car in for a golf cart, coast on the back nine of life, and actually enjoy the landscaping for once. It's such a beautifully simple, peaceful vision after so much chaos.
Today, navigating everyday life in a halfway house is still a massive struggle for him. He still fights that internal voice telling him he's worthless. He still battles the physical, exhausting scars of trauma. But in his notebook, he wrote down this incredible glimmer of hope. No matter the future that the future has in mind for me, I aim toward living it the best I can. Because for the first time in his life, he isn't carrying all that heavy armor. He's just taking it one day, one page, and one breath at a time.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We live in a society that just loves to punish the smoke and completely ignore the fire. We love to brand people as bad kids, throw them in cells, and wash our hands of the whole mess. But looking at this incredibly raw story, what if we actually changed the question? What if instead of looking at someone's out-of-control behavior and asking, what is wrong with you, we actually had the courage to look at the fire and ask, what happened to you? Really think about it. How many people could we finally save?